Tēnā koutou, no mai, haere mai. Welcome to Newsroom, brought to you by Insurance Brokers Alliance. Newsroom is the place where we talk about events far and wide, many of them local, as is the main event actually on this week's Newsroom. The Stadium Committee, or those in charge of the stadium, have reluctantly announced to us that the opening of the local stadium is now put back from July to October this year. It is a bit of a sad event really for Southlanders because so many of us have been looking forward to the opening of this marvellous repaired and restructured and reformatted facility. We're going to take a look at our news clip from South Tonight News now, where Sarah Bedford talks to Alan Dennis about some of the issues here.
The rebuild of Stadium Southland has been delayed yet again, with the completion date being pushed out a further 3 months. The redevelopment had been expected to be completed by July 25th, but that's been revised to late October. Since the rebuild began, the completion date has changed half a dozen times. Southland Indoor Leisure Centre Charitable Trust Deputy Chair Alan Dennis says this delay is due to work being required in the core block.
The core block wasn't assessed after the initial collapse. So we wanted to make sure that we understood to what degree it was earthquake proof, and we found out unfortunately it was less than 30% under the new earthquake code. So we wanted to make sure that we knew what exactly we had to do in the regard of engineering and so on to bring it up to 100% earthquake code.
The assessment of the core was done due to concerns about the build and overall earthquake standards. Mr Dennis says the assessment was not done until December, as concern had earlier been around the part of the building which had collapsed.
People were mostly concerned about what was actually collapsed, and it didn't show significant signs of being affected by the original collapse. In other words, I think the insurance company felt that it was basically intact, and of course that's not proven to be the case.
Until now, the Trust had been confident the rebuild would meet the completion date, so why has this changed?
What we've just recently found out through the scoping of the job of work is that it was underestimated, and the scope and the extent of the work that needs done to bring the stage or the core block up to current code is significantly more than what was first thought. And we've only just found that out after waiting for just over 2 months for that to be designed and peer reviewed and costed.
Mr Dennis says he doesn't believe there is anyone to blame for this delay.
Obviously people look to finger pointing, but in my experience this is just one of those things that happens. It's unfortunate, and I don't believe that anyone could have had a crystal ball to realise that something that was perceived to be untouched during the fall required so much remedial work, in fact a complete rebuild.
Stadium Southland manager Nigel Scout says the delay has affected 8 to 10 events which had been booked.
Well, obviously we had the International Netball Test, New Zealand, Australia. We are working hard with Netball New Zealand though around that, so it hasn't completely gone yet, so we're looking at some other ways how we might be able to assist with that particular one because it has a huge significance to the community. Obviously the Lion Foundation Division 1 netball competition, week-long tournament late September, that has to go because we simply haven't got the infrastructure in place for that. We had an international artist coming out which we hadn't announced, which we obviously can't utilise that. And we've got things like the Polyfest and 1 or 2 others that we're trying to transfer into the Velodrome at the moment.
He says this may have some bearing on people choosing to come back to Stadium Southland, but there's also been loyalty to the province. The delay means an expected loss of around $100,000 to $150,000 from loss of events, while the work on the core block will cost around $1.6 million. The rebuild is expected to cost between $39 and $43 million, but among other challenges facing the project, a funding shortfall remains. An estimated new completion date of late October has now been set, but it's a best estimate at the moment.
Here to discuss that tonight is our panel. Hunter, welcome back to the panel.
It's
Hunter
very
Andrews.
good to be here, Bill.
And Richard Hay. Thank you for being on the panel once again, Richard.
Hi, Bill. Good to be here.
We're going to go to you on this, Hunter. I know it's a particular interest of yours, this stadium. Was this delay avoidable, do you think?
Well, I mean, who can tell? And I mean, it's almost worth calling for some sort of inquiry so we can iron these problems out and identify exactly where things have gone wrong, really. I have to say, though, my boss, Tom Conroy, who had the International Act booked that was going to be in the stadium on that opening in July, well, he's really angry. You know, I in fact have never seen him so angry. He feels in a way humiliated that he has to ring this international act up and say, look, I'm sorry, this isn't on. And in fact, fears for the future really, that can he guarantee and contact future acts to come here? You know, he's been sounded out on 3 or 4 acts in the past, and these have sort of fallen through that may have actually been in the stadium. So he's not happy at all. And I think the feedback in the Southern Times on the internet today, someone was saying sort of Acton Smith stick to selling clothes, and another feedback was that, you know, like a TUI's ad, game on 2012, yeah, right. You know, I mean, and that's the way people are beginning to feel about it. And it's not only that loss of 100 and something thousand for the events, but what about the community and the flow-on effects of those events that we've long awaited for into the community? Certainly that week-long netball tournament and that sort of thing that has to be put off, and the profile that we gain through having a international netball match here. I think we really want to know what's gone wrong here. If this had happened in the private sector, how tolerant would people be? It's a very interesting situation. It would be really good to know exactly what the problem was and why.
Seems like they discovered that the piece that didn't fall down no longer meets the earthquake, of the earthquake standards. And my thought is 30%, is that what it was built to, of the new standards? And it's not very old. So maybe there's an extra.
We all remember when it was built.
We all remember
and the controversy that went on about the location and all those sorts of things.
I mean, to us it was a new building when it fell over. Well, and they've just discovered that, of course, that it no longer meets those standards. One wonders about the delay in finding out about that. I mean, it certainly, as you've just pointed out, had some very serious ongoing effects. How do you feel about it, Richard?
Well,
actually, I know how you feel about it. We have to ask you to be mild, perhaps.
Bill, you remember right back to when the new building was going to be built, and we were given a couple of options, and those options were the hero option or the zero option, which I think was a really good con, because nobody wanted to be seen as being the zero person to suggest the zero option. Everybody wanted to be the hero and choose the hero option. A hero, there's going to be no heroes out of this at all at the end of the day. It's been a bit of a disaster and a PR situation for quite some time. I'm very surprised that when the original stadium was built, that it wasn't built to a standard that when the new standards came in, that 30% was where it was at. I find that right amazing right from word go. But you've got to admit, Bill, we can't afford to have a stadium, the new stadium built when you've got the base of it there at 30%. It's just going to be disastrous if anything happened. And then there's the insurance applications as well, where you're going to have a building of 60% or more for insurance for commercial premises, which this is going to end up being. So they've got no option. Yes, the cost of the premiums. If you can get insurance, indeed, if you're under 60%, I suggest that they won't. The ramifications of not bringing it up to standard is just mind-boggling. We'd never get it open. It's got to be brought up. We've got to reach well in excess of that 30,000. It's just amazing that the original building wasn't up to the standard of. I just can't believe that. But I mean, having said that, it's got to be done.
Yes, there are no options now except get the money from somewhere and do it. Yes. And it seems like 1.6 million is the figure which is being talked about to bring that core piece of the building, it was the administration area, wasn't it, that didn't fall down up to standard. But the thing, Hunter, as you were saying, the real problem is not the 1.6 million. It is having the opening delayed for July, August, September, another 4 months.
And the implications for promoters like Tom Conroy, who want to bring entertainment to the city and want to guarantee, and I mean, agents and that sort of thing, it's a small community. Once word gets around at unreliability and that sort of thing, I think we need to hold some sort of inquiry so that maybe we're probably not going to build another structure, hopefully, like this for a long time. We're talking hopefully generations. But there are areas in New Zealand that may be looking, and maybe they can learn something from this. But let's look at what happened in Christchurch with the rugby stadium there. I think it was 90 days or something like that, and the construction of Dunedin's indoor stadium, the Forsyth Bar Stadium, you know, incredible progress. They had it ready. In fact, they had it ready before the date. You know, I think we need to look at the processes and why perhaps that administrative block was overlooked and why it was only 30%.
And why it has taken so long.
And there's lots of whys
overall
going on here, so that's when
now,
there's a lot of whys.
who would be a good person to do an inquiry like this? Some unbiased person, or will we have to get someone in from the outside?
I think absolutely.
Yeah.
Someone fresh, from a fresh perspective to have a look.
A retired judge or somebody like that? I mean, we couldn't use the judiciary, I mean, who's still working, but
we're talking about more outlay here, of course. Judges aren't cheap, and there's, you know, and there's retired judges not cheap to hold these sorts of inquiries, but I think that this sort of justifies it at this stage with this many postponements of the project.
Yes, yeah. So we wait and see what happens. One thing we do know is that there is a delay. Another thing we know is we have lost several important events, and we only hope that if a new date of October is set, it is done by October. One would hope they'd be working day and night on it, because the delays are very costly. Yes. Something else, of course, which we've been wrestling with here in Southland is the fact that there's been some thought that maybe the Tiwai Point aluminium smelter may be closing down or may not be. And the decision, the outcome, of course, rests with the negotiation for electric power with Meridian Energy. The government has been involved, Meridian have been involved for months and months, and of course we understand the fact these negotiations are taking place with a giant international company whose yearly turnover is something like, Richard, am I correct, half of New Zealand's GDP?
Yeah, I believe
I
so.
mean, Rio Tinto is not your corner shop.
I believe it's more than that.
Yes. I mean, their very name says river of tin. So they started off as tin smelters. Where are we at with this thing? I mean, should we be hopeful and confident the smelter is going to stay open, or are we going to be faced with this scenario of it maybe a gradual shutdown over a long period of time? What do you think?
Oh, well, there's no doubt that we're on the brink of a catastrophe. If it's going to happen, it will be a catastrophe. But I'm quite confident that this will be sorted out. They've gone back into negotiations today, and as I understand it, the gap isn't all that big, and it's more about a long-term situation.
Okay.
And it's perhaps not also about price right now. It could be about other factors in terms of the long-term viability of the contract. So I'd be surprised actually, Bill, if they don't come to an agreement at some point.
Okay.
And they've got the time's not on their side so much now because Rio Tinto is splitting off the company, and that's got to be done within a 3-month period. So time is getting quite short. So I think negotiations today, whether they last a day or go on for a couple of days, I think they'll be pretty heavy.
Right.
Hopefully something might come out of this, or it might be another round again. I mean, we've had quite a few rounds already, but I'm confident that something will come out. But if the worst case scenario happens and it is wound down and closed, then we go back generations, because it will be Invercargill as it was 40, 50 years ago. So let's not hope for Southland's sake and indeed New Zealand's sake, because there is a bigger picture. And one of the things that is capsulated the northern people is cheap power, and that's not going to happen. And we can talk about that till the cows come home, but it's not going to happen because John Key has said they're going to close down other inefficient plants. So the 15%, which won't be 15% when it goes in because of what's lost in transmission.
That's right.
That will be lost because of the closure of the other plants. So that the amount on their grid's not going to be much more, if anything. And if I was a mayor in some of these other regions, Bill, where they're going to close down these other plants, I'd be pretty damn worried too, just as much as what our mayors are. because that's going to be more unemployment.
We're
That's
talking
going
about
to be,
coal-fired plants.
yeah, and we're talking about more families up north.
Yes.
We're talking about other employment up north and the repercussions of that through
Yes.
there.
Now, this is something which hasn't been discussed
No,
yet.
nobody sort of thought about that, and they've sort of buried their heads in the sand thinking, oh, good, cheap power. But
Yeah.
it's not going to be just as simple as that.
No, no. I'm a firm believer in the fact there will not be cheap power. There will be things happen, there will be excuses made, words like reinvestment, it would give them a chance to do that because there's been very little investment in the generating system in New Zealand ever since the NZED went out of existence. You know, those boring people who work for the government, who planned long, efficiently and well ahead and put in a complex and wonderful power scheme up in the Mackenzie Basin. Those people, ever since they went away, nothing has been done hardly. We've had a few wind farms put in. The other thing too, Richard, is of course that when you take an industry like this away, it's not just the industry itself. I believe there's about $1 billion in overseas exchange earned. Would that be correct?
Yeah, that is correct. There's $1 billion worth of export, but the trick here is not to get really so excited about that because everything that is used to make aluminium is imported. So there is a trade-off. So there's a balance of payments, if you like, in there.
Yeah.
And a good, probably quarter, I don't know the figures, I can't tell you that, but there is a lot of product that is imported,
The
and
alumina.
then we finish. We basically we add the labour and the electricity to it.
Yes. Yes.
So the difference between it is what we make really in a net profit, if you like. So it's not as great as $1 million worth coming in because we've got to spend some money. $1 billion because we've got to spend some money getting some stuff to come in to make it.
The downstream industries, of course, there would be tremendous ongoing effect there, wouldn't there? The people who service the smelter, people who work at the smelter, then the people that they buy stuff off, etc. And I think we've canvassed that in the past. That
It's huge.
It'd be horrific.
Bill, it's much more than that. It's also that you're going to lose the population that is servicing, and let's give it a round figure of 3,000, that's what's being bandied around. We could lose 2 to 3% of our population, and so that has the spin-offs of what that population puts into the economy. But our infrastructure is based on the population. So you'll see things like health services, education, policing, roading, all those infrastructural things. The money going into it by the government will go, and it's estimated about $8.6 million a year will be lost in education and in health, just in the money that comes in to help
Less
that to be
kids,
there.
teachers will lose their jobs, move out.
That's
the money
on top
that they
of all
spend,
that.
so it goes leapfrogs, doesn't it?
Absolutely. So as the infrastructure goes down, that's less infrastructure for the rest of the population here. But not also, how are you going to build that back up if you're going to attract more people and more businesses? It just cannot be built up like that. It's taken 40 years to build it up to where it is now through the back of being on the smelter. We're just going to lose all that.
And Hunter, how are our MPs performing
Wow.
in this? Now we've got
There's
we've
this
got
guy,
two
I think he's the Minister of Finance.
electorate-based.
I think he actually is Southland,
Is he?
isn't he? Yeah, I
There's
think
two
so.
Southland MPs,
and
Deputy
he was
Prime
actually
Minister.
promising the lower power and that sort of thing, and anywhere in the world. It reminds me so much of Max Bradford after the wrapping up and splitting up of ECNZ and that sort of thing, that we're actually going to pay less for our power. Well, it's doubled since 1998, 99.
Yes.
You know, nowhere in the world does power go down in price unless it's directly subsidised by the government, and that's unlikely. You know,
Yep.
and Eric Roy, where is he?
Yeah,
Silence.
exactly. We thought of another politician earlier who wouldn't have been silent, didn't we? From many years
Norman
ago.
Jones, you just imagine the noise he'd be making.
It's sometimes good to remember these former characters. But you know, we have got these two electorate-based national MPs, and as you quite rightly pointed out, one of them was talking about what you say, how the power could be used to make cheaper electricity for up north. I mean, what sort of loyalty is that? You wonder.
Well, I wonder where his loyalties lie, certainly. And
Yes.
I think it's a classic example of where all the MPs are now, and it's very top heavy with MMP, with list MPs and that sort of thing.
In this
They're all
respect-
northern based, and
Yeah.
you know, if they can promise things like cheap power, then it's party votes, it's electorate votes and that sort of thing.
So our electorate MPs are not really representing the electorates, are they?
Well,
No.
I think this is a classic example of a cause that, and I understand that Eric Roy is standing down at the next election, from what I've heard, anyway, that this is the ideal opportunity for him to stand up and say, look, let's do something about this
Yes.
situation. To hear Richard say that he predicts a good outcome for the smelter is encouraging.
It's great.
It's encouraging. Yeah.
Yeah, good. Well, I'm actually, it's encouraged me. But the truth of the matter is that if Eric Roy stood up and said, up with this, I will not put, I'm a Southlander, I'm resigning now, there would be a by-election.
It would be interesting.
There would
That
be a
outcome
by-election,
would be very
and that would
interesting.
have a most interesting outcome,
Yeah.
wouldn't it? Indeed. We're going to take a break now. When we come back, we've got some more interesting topics to talk about, so stay with us. Welcome back to Newsroom. Something very interesting, Hunter, is the fact that we do forget history very quickly, don't we? You know, we move on, things happen, last year's last year, all of a sudden it fades into the background. But one bit of history we will never forget is the reign, and I think you have to call it the reign, of Maggie Thatcher in Britain.
Thatcherism, yeah, and I have to say that I sort of feel like I was never a supporter of Margaret Thatcher, and I'll go into that why soon. But you know, when Reagan died and that sort of thing, and Nixon died, you sort of felt that was the real end of an era when the living almost legends of history and decision makers have moved on. But Margaret Thatcher, you know, I respect her greatly for what she achieved, becoming the leader of the Conservative Party and that sort of thing. But I'll never agree. Here are the reasons. You know, 1979 when Vietnam invaded Kampuchea to end in Cambodia that massacre, she supported the retention of Cambodia or Kampuchea's seat at the UN. She supported Augusto Pinochet in Chile, and there are reasons for that because he supplied radar information for her war with the Falkland Islands. Also, you know, the way she okayed the sinking of the General Belgrano, which was a World War II style cruiser with the deaths of sort of 300 innocent conscript sailors, Argentinian sailors and that sort of thing. But she was an amazing personality and a giant personality of the 20th century really, and I definitely remember her. But leading up to her oust from the leadership really, you reminded, it's right that they shouldn't be in leadership roles like that for too long. I'm reminded of Robert Muldoon and that sort of thing, and his controlling attitude towards the end. It was exactly the same with Margaret Thatcher. You know, incredible personality. She will be remembered forever. I would imagine that in 100 years she will be looked upon as one of the maybe not great Prime Ministers of England, up there with Churchill, but certainly a memorable Prime Minister.
Significant one.
And I was listening to this morning on BBC World Service, you know, overnight in the early hours of the morning, with someone Conservative supporter saying, look, isn't it terrible that these young people are jumping up and down on pictures of Maggie Thatcher and there's graffiti around saying Iron Lady, rust in peace and that sort of thing. It's so dishonourable and that sort of thing, but it is what it is. That's what she left us with, that these young people that were never even alive when Margaret Thatcher was Prime Minister, but you know, their parents may have lost jobs during the closing down of the coal pits during the 1980s and that sort of thing with Arthur Scargill. You know, she has left a legacy. And I know it's disrespectful to jump up and down on pictures of dead people because their family are mourning and friends are mourning and that's something, but it is what it is. She's left that legacy, and I certainly think that she will be remembered for a long time. And but then again, she won 3 elections.
She did.
You know, she won 3 elections, and John Major continued her good work, if you can call it good work, and Tony Blair almost did as well. So her mark is huge, and I encourage people to watch Meryl Streep's Iron Lady.
It will be a brilliant
fantastic
production.
portrayal
Yes.
of Margaret Thatcher and her time in office and then her decline.
And she died last week.
She died a couple of days ago.
Yep.
And you know, I do get that feeling, being a bit of a historian, that yes, another figure, a huge figure, has slid off really the world stage, even though she quite obviously was quite ill towards the end. But there are many things that she did that I didn't support. I mean, she wanted to bring back birching and that sort of thing in the 60s, and she was known as the milk snatcher for taking milk away from young kids. You know, for me, and the privatisation of British industry and that sort of thing. Fortunately, she never touched British Rail, which John Major later did, which was an absolute schmozzle. and is sort of a disaster. She said, look, don't ever mention it to me again, we won't privatise British Rail. But yeah, definitely, as I said, is a huge significant figure of the 20th century. Another is gone.
And Prime Minister
and
of Britain
you
for
start
how many
looking
years?
to the other ones. Well, from 1979 to 1990, so 11 years,
It's
the
a long-
longest serving
yes.
Prime Minister of the 20th century.
In Britain.
In Britain, yeah.
What's your recollection of her, Richard?
Well, we're talking last century, Bill, here.
We are, yes.
I do remember last century, or was there, but she certainly had a lasting effect. I didn't take a lot of notice of Maggie Thatcher or any of the politicians around that time. It wasn't something that interested me greatly, and I'm in awe, Hunter, of the information that you've got. I've just had a lovely history lesson.
It's a bad
Thank
habit
you.
of mine.
So, are you selling tickets to the? You must have shares in the movie.
I've actually got
Because
her
I'll be going now.
autobiography. I must read it. I haven't read it yet, I admit.
It'll
but
be a fantastic thing.
from her perspective, those crucial years.
Yes.
But she's certainly going to go down as one of those personalities throughout history, like Winston Churchill
Yes.
did, clearly. So generations to come we're going to hear, because she had such a big bearing on how history moved at that point, and she actually guided history, didn't she, with some of the decisions that we've just heard about. So, but she had her day, and that day's moved on, and it's a different world. Some of that because of what she did.
Yes. The Falklands War was was probably an occasion which none of us expected, and I doubt
She wasn't expected to win that election, and
No.
she did afterwards because of the hero status. And that war could have gone terribly wrong for the British if the Argentinians had more Exocet missiles and that sort of thing. And a few bombs did actually hit ships that were wrongly timed and didn't go off. So that could have been an enormous catastrophe for Britain. They pulled the aircraft carrier Hermes, I think, which was the main aircraft carrier of the task force, out of retirement to actually send them across the Atlantic, really.
Yes.
And it could have gone horribly wrong for her, but she won that election after that.
Yes.
And often historians are saying on the back of that victory. That's why I look so cynically at the sinking of the General Belgrano, which was actually outside the exclusion waters around the Falklands at the time, that the British had said any Argentinian ship enters these waters, it will be sunk. So I think it was HMS Conqueror, the submarine that sank it. Terrible loss of life, completely unnecessary. The Argentinians were defeated, well defeated by that time.
Yes. Yeah. So that was one of the sad memories we have of her reign.
Yeah,
really.
and there are a
many
lot of
British
people that
lives
say
lost as well.
have great memories of her, and
Yeah.
that's another.
Yeah.
That's the other aspect.
Yeah.
Let's
yeah.
not rule them out.
She was a conservative.
Well, she won those 3 elections. I keep saying, but the opposition wasn't in any state through the 80s anyway. I think Michael Foot was the leader of the opposition, and socialism ruled supreme within the Labour Party in Britain at that time.
Yep. Yep. Very polarised. Coming back home, we've had John Key once again saying some things that perhaps in hindsight he might be thinking, I shouldn't have said that, with respect to basically saying we have a long and proud history with respect to the support of South Korea, and we'd always assess a situation on merit, suggesting that if there was a war between South Korea and North Korea, New Zealand would be there to support them. I think he thinks in retrospect that this possibly wasn't a wise thing to say, and so the next day he's qualifying the statement and justifying it. I did hear him saying at one stage too that he was going to be very careful about making statements off the cuff in future. This is perhaps something he needs to do, Richard. Think a little bit more before he opens his mouth.
Well, he's famous for rushing in and saying things like that. Speaking before perhaps engaging a little bit sometimes. But as I understand it, the Korean War was never over. It was just a truce that they are in at the moment. So whatever we bound ourselves to as a government, as a country, we're still somewhat probably got to bind there.
Because the war was never stopped.
Because the war was never stopped.
Yeah.
And it's just sort of in limbo, for lack of a better word. So maybe that was in his mind when he made that comment. And it came out the way that it did. But I wouldn't like to be a politician to make a comment like that. Yeah.
No. It seems, Hunter, like, I mean, with all the carrying on that we've seen from North Korea, really, it's all words.
Oh, it's posturing. Definitely posturing, because we've got a young leader there who's trying to establish himself and to carry out to lead a country like North Korea with the suppression of the population that's so obviously going on there, you've got to have a strong arm, and nothing reads better when you control all the media and that sort of thing, when you start threatening the United States with thermonuclear devices. I mean, this is all good reading for the oppressed proletariat at home. You know, and the war, it was an armistice, and in effect there has been a state of war ever since the 1953, I think. But John Key's comments remind me a lot of, in a way, all the way with LBJ during the Vietnam War, and Holyoake's commitment of New Zealand forces without even presenting it to Parliament. And I really don't know what he was thinking. In a way, it's indicative of him falling over backwards, really, to work in with the international community and say, well, we're here, if you need us, we're here. And maybe things weren't quite engaging as they should have upstairs for John. But he's got a lot on his mind.
I was going to say that. He's a man with many things on his mind, and the press has really made this into something quite serious. I think probably that off-the-hand comment was not as serious as it has been touted to be. One interesting thing I did notice, though, he said that he's been in China, and Mr. Key acknowledged Beijing's leadership role in trying to reinforce a peaceful way through the threats by the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. After the meeting, Mr. Key said the gravity of the North Korean issue was not lost on Mr. Xi. If I pronounced that correctly, the Prime Minister of China. So obviously China is taking a responsible attitude on this. The last thing they want to see is any change in the Korean situation.
The support for North Korea, the main support comes from China. Unfortunately, things are easing back there.
Yes.
You know, there's terrible poverty in North Korea. Hundreds of thousands of people died during famines in the 1990s. They're solely reliant on international aid and the generosity of the West and China. So what we're looking at here is a situation where they're actually finding enough funds. I mean, let's face it, nuclear bombs are 1940s technology, but they are finding enough funds to somehow funnel it in to making these nuclear devices to secure their own positions, the administration at home to secure their own positions, which is terrible. I mean, there's no oil there though, so it's unlikely that we'll do the international community will do anything, because the UN committed to that police action in the early 50s because it was to stop the roll of communism down the Asian Peninsula, you know, and that's not going to happen. So I fear for the poor people. I saw an interesting photo of the Korean Peninsula taken by a satellite at night, and you look at the lights around the South Korea, it's incredible. It's lit up like a Christmas tree.
Yeah.
Up water, nothing.
Nothing at all.
Nothing at all. And I just hope it's resolved quickly. I think there has to be reunification, and not under the communist banner.
Right, exactly.
You know, we've all got a phone or a car nearby that was built in South Korea.
We have. Very, very advanced nation. And Richard, they're doing massive amount of trade, South Korea, aren't they?
Yes, they are. They're one of our good trading partners.
Yeah, and I mean, we've seen we're buying cars off them. And in South Korea, of course, most television flat screens are manufactured, plus many other things. And we kind of think, well, everything comes out of China. No, it doesn't. South Korea provides massive amounts of technical material, quantities of technical material for the whole world.
Shipbuilding, car industry, high technology.
Yeah, machinery. Of course, this isn't the major thing on John Key's mind. I think something which may be playing a little bit more in his thoughts, Richard, is the fact that the GCSB is in the firing line again. I said GCSB, yes, Government Communications Security Bureau. I had to make sure I got those letters in the right order. We now find out, I'm reading in the document here, 85 people have been illegally spied on. I turn over the page. And I'm quoting here from a stuff.co.
Isn't that 88? Aren't they looking
and
at us
now on the next page we find that then it was increased to 88.
Yeah, right now.
Yeah, as I turn the page, and this is acknowledged further down the article. So they are now reporting more and more. 88. We wonder how many individuals we're going to find, New Zealand citizens, who've been spied upon. Is this good enough?
Well, I think when you think about what their job is and that they're legally bound not to spy on New Zealand citizens, then you've got to take the upper hand and say that's totally illegal what you're doing and it's not good enough for what you're doing. But I wonder if this will help to open the debate as to what their role is and what the role should be. And how do you describe a New Zealand citizen as a person who's got New Zealand citizenship? And there's an awful lot of foreigners that have come into New Zealand that have got New Zealand citizenship, and we don't know who those people are, and we don't know why they are. Some of them may be here. And there could be a legitimate reason why these people have been spied on. They may be overseas nationals with our citizenship. We don't know who these people are. So maybe it's an opportunity to look at what their role is and the legalities around how they deliver the services of that role. It'll be interesting when it comes out in the wash, but I suspect that it's not the general citizen that they're actually interested in spying on. And at the end of the day, if a citizen is doing something illegal, be he a foreigner that's come in and got citizenship or not, then you need to be looked at by whatever legal means we have to do so. It's just that these guys got caught up because what they did was technically illegal.
Right. And we have a police force for doing that kind of thing too.
And the SIS.
And the SIS. Now, are the SIS allowed to look at New Zealand citizens?
Yes, they can, and in fact they've been employing the GCSB to look at New Zealanders.
And so maybe this is the angle they're saying, well, we're allowed to, therefore you're doing it for us. Do you think that's what's been going on?
No one's read the legislation by the looks of it.
No, they haven't.
It does sound like it was a contract from the SIS to the GCSB to do the type of spying that they do. And probably SIS have not got the equipment, or they've not got the contacts to be able to do what was needed to keep an eye on these particular people, and that's why the GSCB was involved in doing it. So maybe it's time for a debate over what the role is.
I think that's coming.
Well, that's all about the appointment of Ian Fletcher. I think he knew John Key when he was younger.
He did.
Well, I think their mothers got on quite well.
That's right.
At least they know each other.
At least there's been the whole...
There's no spying required.
That's right, no spying required for that one. The debate has been, of course, whether John Key knew this guy and whether it was a mate's job or whatever it is. But I heard the CEO of the State Services Commission, and I've called him by the wrong name, he's not the CEO, is he the director? Anyway, Mr. Binney, saying the other day that he felt that the whole appointment was above board. Perhaps it could have been done slightly
a bit differently.
Yeah, but in actual fact, it's a kosher appointment.
Surprised at John Key's phone call.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and again, John Key, perhaps it's something he wouldn't do again. But of course, the call has now come to look at the whole law regarding the GCSB for people to understand what that law is, for it to be properly sussed out, and maybe the law changed if it needs to, Richard, reflecting what you said. The fact that maybe they would get used by the SIS from time to time. At the moment, the SIS is not allowed to use them for looking at New Zealand citizens. So it'd be interesting to see if they are going to allow that, though. I don't know if I'd be in favour of it.
I want to know all about these organisations. I want to know how many staff there are. Has it changed much since the end of the Cold War? What are they really doing?
Hunter, they're called secret organisations for a damn good reason.
I know, Richard. But we need to know what their objectives are. Should they be really focused now on protecting New Zealand intellectual property and that sort of thing, rather than perhaps looking out for sinister spies? Should they be looking out for terrorists? What are they really doing? And I think that John Key has made statements that that's what Ian Fletcher's appointment, who does not have a spy background or military background at all, that's what his appointment was all about, to actually sort out the problems.
Right.
Maybe there's a few highly paid public servants that will find themselves looking for other spy jobs.
Now that'd be interesting. Maybe there are some private spy companies. I mean, they privatise the spy companies.
Why not?
Yeah.
Why not privatise everything else?
Well, they're privatising prisons. Maybe it's privatising spy
hospital
companies.
food.
Yes. But we do have to give John Key some kudos here, some credit for the fact that he did engage Rebecca Kitteridge onto getting this thing sorted out, and he was going to release the report. It got released early by the media. Yeah, and there was if there'd been some cover up at the start, if you could call it a cover up, but really his mind has been in the right place to sort it out. And I don't believe myself that there was any intention to hide any of this stuff just to sort it out.
But you can tell he's getting annoyed, though, as comments about the media and that sort of thing, that he's going to be more careful. And I can't remember what he called the media, but some commentator said, you've got to be wary of people that buy ink and paper by the ton. You've got to watch what you say about the press, because they can turn on you. And I'm noticing that today, certainly online, the photos they were using of John Key was sort of concerned photos rather than that usual happy chap on John Key. So maybe the tide has turned with the media about their attitudes.
At the end of the day, they want to sell news, don't they? I mean, that's what they're into, is selling news or selling the media.
And they've got to read how the public feel.
Yeah, Exactly. We are going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to have topics of interest, a couple of other things as well. We'll see you soon. Welcome back to Newsroom. Just before we go to topics of interest, I want to talk about some new legislation that's been introduced to Parliament, Richard, to try and curb cyberbullying. Of course, this has never been a problem in the past because, well, basically we haven't had all these cyber devices, handhelds, whatever, you know, and of course, the advent of the internet, instant communication for everybody, that something can be put out there in an instant and it can be devastating. So this piece of legislation, is there any danger in it, or is it just something which is necessary?
Well, I think the danger is to have something that's going to be effective. As I understand it, a lot of the cyberbullying is done by people that are underage for prosecution. So it's all very well to come out with a whole lot of rules and regulations in terms of jail sentences or fines, but how are they going to stick once they start going to the court? Because as I say, a lot of these people that are creating the cyberbullying are underage. So it's going to be a hard one to do anything with. But Facebook, I'm pleased to say, is starting to do something about that. They've done put in effect overseas some costs if you are going to text or send a message from your Facebook page to somebody else's Facebook page unless they are one of your friends.
Okay.
And they're going to put that on. In fact, they've gone further overseas and they're now putting in a charge of around $18 if you want to send a message from your Facebook to a well-known personality like maybe a singer or something like that. It's one of the reasons to clamp down. It could be also to make a few bucks, of course. No doubt
I'm sure it's not. They're just being responsible.
So they're introducing into New Zealand a 60 cents charge if you were to make send a message from your Facebook to another person's Facebook, and it's a person you don't know that's not one of your friends. So that could help a little, because if you're going to use that as a medium, and a lot of people are using that as a medium, you can soon rack up a few dollars at 60 cents a throw. So that's going to help. Yes, the government's got to do something about it. It's getting epidemic, and it's bullying is getting, as we knew it when we went to school, it's totally different now because it's a totally different totally different playing field. So they've got to come out with something. The danger's going to be, is it going to be effective, or by putting these regulations, these fines in place and the jail sentence idea in place, is it just going to send a message to youth who are underage, oh, I can do these things and get away with it. And then when they become of age, they'll carry on with that mentality that's already been soaked in, and then we've got a bigger problem.
That's interesting. You ever heard anybody who's been attacked in this way, Hunter?
No, I haven't personally, and you know, being younger was so long ago, but I certainly remember being bullied and bullying going on at school, and it was usually the biggest guy doing it.
Yeah.
But now it can be anyone.
Yes.
You know, and
they're not
many
seen.
Others can jump on board too.
Yes. All hiding behind the
anonymity of the internet or whatever,
Yeah.
and the psychological impacts. And you know, we may dismiss these comments and that sort of thing as adults. We go, well, come on, grow a hard skin, that sort of thing, move on, or whatever. But being 12, 13, and being subjected to a barrage of tasteless and
other people's opinions are very important at that age.
And people see it's a chance to participate, or it's a chance to look like you're endorsing someone else's position on a situation, whereas in the old days you would have had to step up in the schoolyard and actually verbally make contact with these children, or ring them at their home in the evening and probably get through their parents and go, you know, is Johnny there because I want to call him a blah blah blah, and or whatever. These are all gone now, and children are reaching to their phone and it's going off and they're getting really hurtful statements and comments coming from multiple different angles, and we're getting suicides unfortunately linked to this, and it's something has to be done. Whether that's, you know, I know the enforcement line is huge and it's very hard to enforce these things. As Richard said, they're underage, and you know, but it's education too. You know, whether we have to write something into the curriculum at schools that says this is not right. Let's be sensible about this.
You're right, you've got it on the nail in terms of the way that bullying's happening. It used to be face-to-face, it would be over and done with, there might be some fisticuffs after it, and sure there would be people hurt from bullying for a long time.
There'd be numerous witnesses of it, maybe.
Yeah, but it didn't go viral, and this is the danger of today's technology. It goes viral, so it's it's so much worse. Even a slight comment, because the person's not there to face up. It could be anybody saying it just for the hell of saying it, and you're just destroying somebody's life because it's viral. It's quite different to what it used to be, bullying.
So something had to be done, and I've got no doubt this isn't the last we're going to see of this. They're going to bring a piece of legislation in, and I have got no doubt that as this is a very fluid thing. You know, we've seen the introduction of Facebook. Now kids are moving from Facebook onto another thing, which I do not understand yet. I've no doubt they'll educate me on it, Tumblr. And after that, there'll be something else. There'll be something else. And so there's going to be a continual need, I believe, for the authorities to keep up with these kind of things. And at the same time, balancing it over against the fact that nobody wants too much surveillance over their lives.
No.
But
We've already got a huge amount more than we used to have.
One would assume, Bill, that in schools that there, because everybody at school has a cell phone and they're texting all the time, that there is most schools would have policies that if they found bullying happening on through texts, that they would get rid of the cell phone, or there would be punishment within the school.
A case to answer.
Yep.
I think that most schools will be on board with that now. I'm certainly aware of schools, of course, working in the industry and in my own school, that it is considered to be a particularly serious matter, and it's dealt with in that way.
Well, I went to Rolleston Prison, not as an inmate, I have to add,
But
but to film something on their organic farm there a couple of years ago, and our cell phones went dead as soon as we got on that property.
Right.
There was no exchange of information. They had, they were doing something electronically. This may be something that has to, of course this doesn't, in the schools, but this doesn't protect children outside of schools, of course. But
yeah, unfortunately, they're also used as a medium for the school itself to get in contact with the pupils. So that it's a recognised way of communication nowadays. But you're right, that's right throughout prisons, and it's not a hard technology to use. It can be used in any sort of situation. But yeah, it's just become such a teachers use it to contact their pupils.
That's right.
I know the program that we're involved in the enterprise training. Within schools, we use it to be able to contact the students in school that we deal with. It's a necessary communication.
The growth in cell phones, or your own device. We have BYOD, bring your own device. The growth in these things has been exponential.
And we're all learning on the hop, aren't we? Really?
I've never seen anything like it. And young people are the ones who advance the quickest. And so we've suddenly, all of a sudden, we've basically gone through a quick transition from cell phones and texting, cell phones that text, straight into everybody logging into the Wi-Fi wherever they go. It's being offered everywhere. It's on the buses, it's in the library.
The
Schools have basically got open slather, high-speed internet, very high-speed internet. And so it means you can have any one of a number of devices on there at any time, and without any serious effect. The networks can handle it, and this is where the movement has come. It's where the change has come, and so we've suddenly leapt into a new era of technology, I think. So legislation like this, it won't be the last. I don't think so. Topics of interest, and your first, Hunter.
Well, look, I've got two really quick ones. I hope there's enough time for this, but the recent death of Superintendent Bruce Hutton, who planted the cartridge in the Arthur Allen Thomas case. The Deputy Commissioner, and his name escapes me now, giving the eulogy at the funeral, saying that he was an officer with the utmost integrity, and Arthur Allen Thomas has broken a decade of silence today to give a press conference to say, well, he certainly was not. The Police Commissioner fired back today saying, well, actually that was a quote from 1967 before the murders. So it was all right to give that in the eulogy at the funeral of Superintendent Bruce Hutton. So that's quite incredible. And the other thing I wanted to talk about was the Wahine sinking from 45 years ago. Now I have a rather personal story about this because my grandmother was actually on the Wahine.
Yes.
And it's not really humorous, but she survived the Napier earthquake. My grandfather and grandmother had a family arrangement, something on in Wellington. My grandfather flew. My grandmother took the Wahine from Christchurch because flying was unsafe.
Right. Did you say she survived?
Oh, she did survive.
Oh, right.
Yes,
Oh, good.
yes, she did survive.
Yes.
I'm happy to say she did survive.
I'm old enough to remember the sinking of the Wahine vividly. I remember the storm vividly, and I remember receiving the news that the Wahine had gone down. Because I was living in Christchurch at the time. We had floods, which of course I was forced to go out and
Yep.
investigate on my motorbike.
And it was actually, if I can quickly fit this in, it was a real turning point in broadcasting in New Zealand. That was before we had a nationwide network. So what happened was someone from Christchurch, TVNZ or what was NZ Broadcasting then, drove all the way to Nelson and filmed, because in Nelson you could actually pick up the spillage TV reception from Wellington. He set up a camera in front of the TV in Nelson, took the footage, drove it all the way back to Christchurch, developed it, and so the South Island could see what was happening to the Wahine, which led to the fast tracking of the nationwide network.
Yeah.
So interesting
we've
in many
come a long
ways.
way, haven't we? Yeah. It's good to remember things like that. They were significant events. Yeah. Richard?
Oh, the interesting thing for me this week was Shell Oil really coming down here and doing a presentation which was very open, saying where they were and where they think they were going, and dispelled a lot of myths that were out there. We're riding a lot of hope on the thought that there will be oil or gas down in the Great South Basin and that Southland's going to prosper from it. It was interesting to learn that Hunt didn't actually find oil at all, and that's a long story and I could talk at length about the whole story, but the upshoot of it, the message to get across really is that they have a drill or drop that they have to do in January next year. That is, they've got to make up their mind whether they're going to drill for gas or whether they're going to walk away from it. And we will see for the next 10 years, if they decide to carry on, we will see for the next 10 years exploratory wells, which won't give a lot of economy boost to Southland if we do get a base down here, if Dunedin don't get it. And then if they decide to start producing and drill and bringing it out, it's going to be 2025 before we see anything happen. So don't get all excited about this going to be a little oil state. It's not going to happen in this generation, well, certainly for a decade or decade and a half.
But Shell is a significant company, aren't they? They don't go around doing things like that lightly.
Oh, exactly. There's a 50-50 chance that they will strike something. And 50-50 chance, that they will drill, and there's about a 30% chance that it will be successful.
Okay. They're bringing a floating rig, are they? Out
for the tests.
So it's out in the Great South Basin?
Yes,
okay,
yes,
right.
Yes. For the tests, it'll be all pretty casual floating stuff, and it'll only last for about 40 days.
Okay. Those rigs are very expensive to maintain, actually. I'd say they'd want to get it over and done with pretty quick. My topic tonight is the fact that I was very gratified to see that the retail giants, the heading was in the press, retail giants reject the youth wage, and they've decided to go with the minimum wage at $13.75 an hour. And we're talking, McDonald's, KFC, those ones there, and Warehouse. Hunter, I just actually slipped my mind. I think it probably will be. Yeah. But I felt it was a very positive move, and congratulations to those companies, those young people that work there. They work as hard as an adult, and I think they should be paid equivalently for doing that. And the companies can, obviously, they say, well, we can afford to do this. Maybe they thought they couldn't afford not to. Maybe the publicity of paying a youth wage,
isn't it?
may have been too much for them. But no, good on them. For whatever reason, I think it's a very positive move, and it sends a good message to young people as well. So even paying them that, though they're not really overpaid, are they?
Well, I mean, I think about the times when I had part-time jobs, and you did work in the weekends and that sort of thing when people with families were at home with their families.
Yes.
I was talking to someone the other day actually on the crew for Club Rugby. We were on double time in the weekend.
Good.
That doesn't exist now, and this is great to see that major retailers and food chains and that sort of thing aren't succumbing to this legislation.
Excellent. On that happy note, we're going to end tonight's show. Just to say thank you very much to Hunter Andrews and to Richard Hay for being on the panel once again. We've had some very interesting discussions, and we'll see you with more interesting discussions in a fortnight's time. Ka kite anō. We'll see you later.